Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage, on a beautiful Tuesday morning. Excuse my voice, I'm getting over a head cold. We're almost out of the woods. This morning I came out and I had a few things on my mind about the chassis or frame on this 47 Ford truck project. The frame I'm using, it's got a storied past. It's never been used for anything. It's been together for a while. I was around, and I know for a fact it came as a kit from here back, the back half kit. The frame section from there forward, I had nothing to do with, and I don't know what it's made out of, and it's completely sealed. As I was loading it at my friend's house, when I hauled it home for the final time, he voiced his concern. He says, you know, that frame's only 85 thousandths thick, measuring the back part that you can see. He's like, that's not thick enough. It should be thicker. And that's been in the back of my mind. So now I'm at the point where I'm going to do something with the frame, and I'm going to put a roll cage on it, and I want it to cert for at least 850. ET in the quarter mile, NHRA spec. So either in this situation, or if you're going to go look at a car you want to buy that has a roll cage or a chassis or a frame in it, and you want to know what it's made out of, what do? So real quick, off the top of my head, if your vehicle has a 6-point roll bar, you can go 10 flat in a quarter mile. If you want to go faster than that, 999 or quicker, you need a roll cage, and that roll cage has to be inspected by an SFI approved chassis inspector every few years. You can look online. The NHRA rulebook is available free, and the only roll cages they're going to talk about, roll bars and roll cages, are down to 850. Quicker than 850, you have to call the SFI Foundation, buy the booklet that pertains to your particular vehicle, what the frame or chassis is made out of, and how fast you want to go. In mild steel, which this 47 Ford is, the main frame anyway, is only able to go, if I put the, a 750 cert cage in it, that's as fast as I can go. And that's plenty fast, don't get me wrong. If you wanted to go faster than that, right now you'd have to cut it apart and start over. The entire chassis would have to be made out of chrome moly. So that's it in a nutshell. The chassis inspector is going to have a ultrasonic tester, much nicer than this one. And they're going to check all your tubing to make sure it meets the spec, which is in the SFI book, or if it's slower than 850, in the NHRA rulebook. You will find no mention in the NHRA rulebook down to 850 about the frame rail thickness, because, as I mentioned, it could be welded to the sheet metal on the floor if you don't have a frame, or to whatever OEM frame you had. You have to attach it to if you have a frame, but they don't talk about specifics of thickness because that would be messy. They do talk about rocker bars, if you need those, and how thick they would have to be, but it's not until 750 start getting down to the nitty-gritty and the information that I really wanted. If I was building a 750 cert mild steel chassis, how thin or thick would my frame rails need to be in 2x3 rectangular tubing? The answer is 083. Hard to believe, but that is acceptable spec. So if that entire frame was made out of 083, my buddy said 085. Typically it measures a little bit thicker than the spec. That's the minimum, I suppose. It would be acceptable. But I still want to know. I picked this rig up here. It's a Benitech GM100. Case and all on Amazon is just under $100. I believe I got it from a buddy of mine in a trade. He wasn't happy with it because it only reads in millimeters. Fortunately, in the world we live in now, with your smartphone, you can just put in 2.2 millimeter to decimal, and there's your decimal reading, what you need, because that's what the specs are written in our country anyway. It's a pretty simple rig to use. You need this special contact goop, which goes on your contact tip. It will not read without it. Instructions are pretty clear, but basically you turn it on. It's going to go through a self-check. Stand by. I'm going to go ahead and put some goop on the transducer because I know I need it. A little dab will do you. And every time you stick it on something, you should also remove rust. You can leave paint probably, but it doesn't like rust. So it's now showing me a number. That is my sound velocity. Different if I was measuring wood or glass or something, it's going to have a different number. This will measure that. But I'm only interested in metal. It gives you a standard on the front so you can check it. 4.0, which is my standard, so I know I'm calibrated. Got to put more goop on now. This is 083 chromoly tubing. I measured it, and I'm showing 086. So it's slightly thicker than the spec. Round is a little more difficult. You need a little more goop. But it's showing 2.2 millimeters. And using my phone to swap that over, that is 0.086. So using that information, I know now the tool is accurate. I rechecked the rear frame rails, even though I can measure they're wide open in the back of the truck. Excuse me, and they're showing 0.85, 2.2 millimeter. The front frame rails are measuring 120,000. So whoever built the frame built it out of 120 wall from there forward. Kind of doing me a favor. I mean, I guess technically the truck is heavier than it needs to be, but I was kind of worried that it was going to be flimsy. I've had a chassis in the past. First one I ever built, I ended up putting a big motor in it, and it was not necessarily adequate. For lots of other reasons. It didn't have enough tubing around it, and a lot of things have changed since then. So that is how I know now, with a really simple tool, that the frame in that truck is sufficient for what I want. This tool is really handy if you're going to go shopping for a drag race car, or even a stock car, or whatever, and you know what spec your chassis tubing needs to be. This will prevent you from buying something that's not safe. I see a lot of times that a lot of drag racers will take their project to a stock car chassis shop, and in, like, for instance, NASCAR, 1 3/4 095 wall tubing is the standard. In the 6-point roll bar we talked about originally, that has to be 1 3/4, but not 095. Has to be thicker. 120 is the minimum. So 0.120. So with this simple tool, you could prevent yourself from having to cut the whole car apart when you get it home. In that case, if you have one or one of your buddies, you might be going for a ride with them to check it out. Sounds like my voice is not going to hold up much longer, so I'm going to call it quits. Have a great day. Enjoy the sunshine. Spring is on the way. Take her easy.